Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, The Culture Cabinet. It's so good to see you again. Today we're going to be talking about leadership and how do we become a great leader. So the video is going to be split in three parts. The first one is a definition of leadership. The second one and the third one are going to be two myths around leadership that I'm going to debunk with you today. The content of this video is adapted from the research of Ronald Heifetz on leadership, who is the founder and director of the Center of Public Leadership at Harvard Kennedy School. Okay, well, let's get started. Imagine that this is a dance floor and we're in motion, or a playing field in sports. When you're on the playing field or on the dance floor, you generally only see the people right near you. If you're dancing, you see maybe the person you're dancing with and a few other people close by. But if you're able to get up onto a balcony and look down, you'd see that there's a larger playing field. There's a lot going on. You may begin to notice that when the music is fast, some people are dancing, and when the music is slow, other people are dancing. And you may notice that there's some people who are sitting out the dance all the time. They're not actually on the balcony, they're just preoccupied with not dancing. But the balcony is a place from which you can step back, even emotionally, a little bit more detached and observe and try to then, in a diagnostic, make sense of where we're now. What's happening? So that you can then go back on the dance floor and make your next move. And in leadership, the capacity to move from action to reflection, back to action, back to reflection, to move from the dance floor of action to the balcony of reflection, and back and forth is really critical. You might be wondering, what does it take to be a great leader? What kind of skills or qualities or abilities do I need to develop? Or maybe you have the picture of someone in mind that you really admire as a leader, and you wonder, what is it about them that makes them such great leaders? Well, all these questions are really important indeed, but I don't think that those characteristics actually define a good leader from a bad leader. I think the real question is, what do great leaders actually do? Why do we need leadership? And actually, I'm wondering, do you have in mind one person or several ones that you really consider as great leaders? Someone who's achieved really great things for the world, or even just really great things around you and you consider them as leaders? Please put them in the comment below. I would love to have your views on that. In a perfect situation, without challenges, where everything is working just right with the perfect balance in the world around us, well, we would have achieved heaven on earth, right? And we would keep celebrating our blessings, and there would be no call for leadership. Most people tend to define leadership by the hands or the tools. Hands are the personal abilities, the ability to practice courage, to resolve conflicts, to listen, to relate to people, or to handle ambiguity. While the tools is actually the people that we put in position of power or influence, the tools of persuasion or influence, or really just the power and authority that we have. Well, yes, those hands and tools might be important to become great leaders, but the myth that anyone can be a great leader just by developing personal abilities, skills, or qualities is actually not really true if they understand the problem at hand in the wrong way. Think of leadership as the craft of carpentry. You may need good hands and good tools, but the hands and the tools don't define carpentry, because the same hands and tools could be used to, for an artist building a sculpture, or for a cabinet maker making fine furniture. The challenge of building something does actually define the craft to achieve the vision that we have in mind. Let's start with myth number 1. Leaders can fix everything. When we encounter challenges in any aspect of our lives, from families to small businesses, from towns to cities, from states to nations, and within the complex network of our international communities, challenges usually fall into two categories: technical work and adaptive work. Technical work or technical challenges or problems are gaps that can be bridged using our collective and individual capacity. We face these problems every day in our lives. We face gaps between our desires in our current situations that can actually be closed quickly because they are routine. For example, we're hungry. I am hungry. And for most people, though not all, there is an elaborate and largely visible economic system in place that allows us to bridge the gap between our state of hungriness and going to the kitchen or the grocery store. They are not necessarily simple to solve, but we already have the know-how and the system that have been developed by our communities and by societies to simply solve them. And these do not require leadership. If you're at work and your manager is actually delegating work, he or she says, do that, or we're gonna do that, etc. They're actually just doing their job, they're delegating work. And this is not leadership. They are just applying what they already know. Adaptive work, however, is an innovative challenge. It's a situation, a problem, or an opportunity that we don't clearly know how to narrow and which requires to build on our old capacity to create new ones. By analogy, all human beings want to thrive, and that has the bottom line of reproductive success, having many offsprings. But the limitation to that thought is that thriving can actually mean different things to different people, having a big family or no children at all. But beyond that, as human beings, we strive by realizing our moral and spiritual values, like, for example, doing meaningful work or raising children to be good human beings, or, having a positive impact on our society. And therefore, we create new gaps between our aspirations and our reality that we then need to close. Have you ever had, those kind of dreamy scenarios in your head of what success would look like for you? The vision you have of yourself, your family, your organization, or the world. Well, that's your adaptive challenge. Therefore, adaptive challenges are not only produced by our physical or competitive environment around us. Adaptive challenges also come within us. It's our values and purpose. For example, when we think about changing corporate culture, and I talk about that in my previous video actually, so if you want to go have a look, please feel free to do so. Changing corporate culture is actually an adaptive challenge because it means that the way we've been doing things around here is not working anymore. That the current capabilities that we have don't allow us to rise to the levels of our aspirations and values that we set for the organization. And that's why it's so hard to change the culture of organization. You need to build new capacities and sometimes even reassess your values. But it's not only hard because you need to go beyond what you already know. It's also really hard because you don't really know whether this is going to be a success and you don't know what you might lose in the process. You know the adage, people resist to change. Well, that's not necessarily true. When you think about it, would you give back a winning lottery ticket? No, because you're not stupid, right? People like change when they know that it's good for them. It's the loss that accompany change that we resist. When change involves real potential loss, we hold on to what we have and resist change. Why do you think people struggle to go from working 5 days in the office to working 5 days full-time at home? And why do you think people today don't really want to go back to the office 5 days a week? Well, leadership requires a deep respect for the pains of change. If you as a leader make the choice of bringing all your employees back to the office or keeping them full-time at home, you need to know what you're asking from your people when you're asking them to change. These are the type of challenges that call for leadership. Leadership is actually the practice of adaptive work. And the most common source of failure in leadership is actually a diagnostic failure. The first reason why people in position of authority tend to address an adaptive challenge with a technical solution comes from the dynamic of the position itself. For example, in 2021, the year of the Great Resignation, when millions and millions of workers in the world have quit their job, people who stayed in those organizations ended up being overstretched and overworked because of low resources. So we expect from people of authority to actually fix that quickly and replace workers as if it was a technical problem, just to bring back some sense of normality with the least amount of pain in the least amount of time. But that actually puts enormous pressure on people in position of authority to actually have the answers right away, rather than take some time to step back and ask the tough questions. The second reason why people in position of authority tend to address adaptive challenges with technical solutions is personal. It's from it's their identity actually. It's what authoritative means. And it's really hard for them to acknowledge that they've come to the edge of that expertise. We all take pride in knowing rather than not knowing. So in return, people should also give that respect to leaders and give them the chance to actually think, gather, and ask questions. So a crucial skill in leadership is actually to have this ability to get off the dance floor, step back, and get on the balcony and notice when and how you are actually being pushed to see a problem as technical when it may not be. Myth busting number 2, leadership and authority are the same. The common confusion about leadership is that we have a tendency to equate leadership with authority. And that's normal because we hear it in our everyday lives, in TV, in newspaper. We refer to leaders of the country, the Congress, the school, the project. Journalists and scholars write about leaders and, ask them about the kind of skills that they develop to achieve that position of authority. Or, how do they get there? As if they were talking about leadership when they are actually talking about authority. So it's so natural for us to talk about leadership by referencing it to position of authority. But it's not necessarily true, and it's actually a clouded vision of leadership. Authority actually takes the form of a basic social contract where we entrust people with power over decisions, resources, or to perform services. And authority actually takes two forms, formal and informal authority. Think about formal authority as just the system of an organization. An organization is actually a system of authorizations. From a junior whose role is actually to tidying up data from Excel spreadsheets, to the role of the CEO. They both are entrusted with the power to get their job done. Your job description actually describes the power of the job, the specific services that you are trusted to provide with integrity and competence. It is actually a set of reporting relationships. Someone senior to you is actually authorized by the rest of the organization to check and guide your work. The CEO reports to the board of directors, who then formally get authorized by the government to supervise that you actually comply to the rules and regulation, etc. In our everyday lives though, authorization remain mainly informal. We look to people to represent a point of view, to champion a cause, to give us advices, or even to bless us religiously. We look to them with broader admiration, and that goes beyond the trust that we've given them to get the job done. And that gives them even more power. And that can take extraordinary proportions when those people actually gain charismatic and moral authority in our eyes. Take, for example, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. or Gandhi. They both declined to take higher political or organizational office because they saw way more advantages leading with informal authority that millions and millions of people gave them, and to lead without formal authority. And to my opinion, they were kind of right, because think about it, if you're in an organization and you have the formal authority to get the job done by, as described in your job description, but you don't have any informal authority, well, it's going to be way harder to achieve what you set out to do. Formal and informal authority comes with its own set of power. And it's actually way more effective when they come together as complementary form of influence. Another important aspect that shows how authority and leadership are actually distinguished is that you can actually lead without authority. That sounds counterintuitive, right? And yeah, there are actually disadvantages in leading this way if no one has asked you to go beyond your job or if you're nobody's go-to person. But there are actually way more advantages in leading this way. And that's really important for people to know that, because many people wait years to get to that position of authority, thinking that when they get there, they can finally lead. But many people actually lead, laterally and upwards beyond their authority, and even within communities where they have no authority power whatsoever. Martin Luther King, for example, he led completely outside his sphere, upward to the White House, laterally across many sections of the American community. Or even Greta Thunberg. No one has asked her to go beyond the authority to fix the environmental crisis or limit climate change. Yet, she became the most influential environmental change leader in the world. She went outside her usual sphere, upward to the COP26 or the Swedish Parliament, and laterally across the whole world. And by distinguishing leadership from authority, we can finally capture lessons from heroic people, many unsung heroes, who lead every day just because they care. So if I had to reflect on what we talked about today and give you 4 takeaways in terms of how to become a great leader, the first one to me is really the capacity to distinguish between a technical challenge from an adaptive challenge. The second thing is really the ability to bridge that gap between what we think is true and where we want to go. Vision is important, but it's also about connecting people together to achieve that vision. It's about listening, asking questions, gathering, mobilizing, and getting on that balcony. But more importantly, the third takeaway from today is that leadership is relational work. It requires respect from both ends of the spectrum. Leadership requires a deep respect for the pains of change, as much as leaders ask for respect when they don't have all the answers. The fourth takeaway is that you can be a leader without authority. So be the leader of your life, find your adaptive challenge that you can address, and just lead. Please subscribe, share, like, or comment if you have anything to share, if you have questions, if there's anything else that you'd like to add about leadership and who you think might be a great leader to you. Please feel free to do so in the comment below so that I can get some engagement around my videos and keep doing them. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week in our next video. Bye!